Good afternoon. My name is Bamidele Demerson. I'm the Chief Curator at the African American Museum and Library at Oakland, in Oakland, California. Thank you for joining us for this presentation uh, as we celebrate the joy of first fruits, Furaha ya Kwanzaa. And we're focusing on the sixth day of Kwanzaa, which is Kuumba, meaning creativity. So today we're going to be looking at resonances of Africa in Black American folk life and art. The images in this presentation are taken from various sources on the internet. Now, suppose you were in a crowd like the one that you see here. And I came and said that we are going on a trip. So you and a group of 400 random persons are placed on an airplane. And I've given you the instruction that you only have the clothes on your back. You are told you can take nothing else. And so the question that I would raise, what do you take with you? So you and the 400 persons on board are given no information. You don't know where you're going, and you don't know who you will meet. You and the 400 other passengers are going to experience a rocky landing. Although you were told that you can take nothing aboard, I want to ask you, what did you bring anyway? I want you to take some time and write your responses on a piece of paper and share your responses with your friends and your family who are watching with you. Now, perhaps you have an impression of what the African captives felt like when they were forced to undertake the transatlantic crossing, commonly called the Middle Passage. In addition to the clothes on your back, what did you bring with you? And what did they bring with them? So I ask you again, in addition to the clothes on your back, what did you bring with you? So I want you to think about that. Black people often exclaim, "We are an African people." Do we really believe this statement? What is the evidence of Africanity beyond phenotype or physically observable characteristics, such as dark skin, coiled hair texture, brown eyes, full lips, and so forth? But is there cultural evidence? How do we evaluate, interpret, verify this proof? More fundamentally, how do we define culture? And so we come to this slide. This is the wedding party or the old plantation, and it's from the Abbey Aldrich Rockefeller collection. And so we see a wedding party that is in progress, and you will see this person is playing the banjo. Another person is playing drums. And so these are resonances of Africa in African American culture. And notice the unglazed pottery that's sitting on the ground below the bench. These look like unglazed pieces of pottery. And the reason for that, we know that if it's unglazed, we know that when it's filled with water, it will condense on the outside and cool or refrigerate the contents on the inside. And so we see the science of working in clay that's part of the cultural memories of Africa that's at play in the slide or in this image that we see here. Now, the old plantation is a watercolor created in the late 1700s, and this is in the Abbey Aldrich Rockefeller Folk Art Center at Colonial Williamsburg in Virginia. And when we think about resonances in African American culture, the upper left is an image of a 17th century drum that's about 18 inches high. It's from Virginia, but now it's in the British Museum in London. But below that, we see a drum that is from the Akan people of Ghana, or present-day Ghana. And so we see what obviously may have served as a model for the creation of the one from the drum that is from Virginia. And some have argued that when the drum was taken away from the Africans, or in the Western Hemisphere, the body became a percussive instrument. And so we see here on the right, we see two performers that are performing hambone. So a cultural memory of Africa. When we look again at the next slide, we see, we saw the banjo in the previous, a couple of images back. And we're looking at here a drawing of a banjo, and this is from New Orleans, Louisiana. The prototype for that instrument is the kora. And so we see below the man that's dressed in red playing the kora. This is an instrument from the Senegambia region. You will recall that in the story Roots, Kunta Kinte taught his daughter Kizzy that stringed instruments in West Africa were known as ko. And Kizzy learned ko, which is really, in fact, an elision of kora, or a shortening form of the word kora, K-O-R-A. But to the right, we see someone playing a banjo that is not handmade, but is actually one that is manufactured. So the banjo instrument, even though it is associated from the early beginnings with African-American instrumentalists, we no longer associate the banjo for the most part with African-American musicians. And so we tend to think of other people playing this instrument, but in fact, it has its origins in Africa. And so we have an image of Henry Asawatana's work, The Banjo Lesson, where an elder is teaching a very young boy how to play this instrument. And we have to the right an image by Romare Bearden, and this is called The Three Musicians. But notice that the three musicians are playing quarterphone instruments. So we see two playing guitars and one playing the banjo. And so these are memories of Africa that have survived in African-American material culture. And first banjos were made by hand, and now they're manufactured by companies. Another musical heritage when we think of Africa, and that is the bowed instrument. We have here a man playing a bowed instrument in the upper left-hand corner. And notice he's playing this with his mouth. There is a beverage can that's used as a resonator. And we see below from West Africa, we see women playing a bowed instrument. And on the right side, we see the bowed instrument known as the berimbau in Brazil. In the upper right corner, we see the instrumentalist playing the berimbau. But from Angola, we see where this instrument actually comes from. And so this is an Angolan playing the instrument that looks virtually the same. We see the gourd resonator. We see the stick that's used to pluck the cord or to pluck the string, which is often tightened metal. And in each case, in Brazil as well as in Angola, we see the gourd that serves as a resonator that's placed next to the body, or specifically the stomach. And so when we think about remembrance of Africa, or the resonances of Africa, we see this here. So when I ask the question, what did you bring on the plane with you? You brought your memories, and you processed those memories and brought them, and then used that to recreate some resemblance of culture as known in the homeland. We see here the work of Sonia Clark. She is an artist, but she is inspired by African and African-American hair forms or hair designs, and particularly the braided hair and how it is divided and then combed, and the artful creations that are made, so that even hair is part of the cultural memory of Africa in America. We see in her next slide, we see the $5 bill, and we see Abraham Lincoln has an afro. And so this is a little humorous, but the artist is using her energies to create works of art to show, in this case, memories of Africa. We have here even baskets that are that we see in the Charleston area. On the left hand side, we see a number of baskets that have been created, coiled grass baskets. They are coiled row upon row and then sewn or affixed to each other. These baskets are from the Sea Islands or the South Carolina Gullah people. And so they are made with coiled grasses, pine needles, and palmetto strips that are used to sew the baskets together. And to the right side, we have images of coiled grass basketry from West Africa, from the Hausa people. The upper basket is a storage basket, and the lower is a coiled grass basket that functions as a lid that would be placed on the top of, let's say, a ceramic bowl or a calabash. And so it's to prevent insects and so forth from entering the whatever is stored below. When we think about what the Africans brought with them, they brought with them a memory of material culture. And in this case, the way of making brooms. And so this is an image from the period of enslavement, and we see women sweeping the yard, so keeping it clean. And so brooms are very significant. And so brooms are so significant that when Africans were denied the right to get married, they solemnized their marriages often by jumping the broom. And so we see this image on the left. We see a man and a woman holding a broom, and that is going to be probably placed on the floor. And the couple will then be asked to jump over the broom. Now, broomstick marriages are very old, and they are found in this custom is actually found in Europe, in the British Isles. And but again, that's one part of the story. The other part of the story is the significance of brooms in African culture, and what did the brooms mean becomes significant. Now, in the upper right-hand corner, we see an image by Varnett Honeywood, and this is this work is titled "I Do Thee Wed," and we see at the foot of the bed we see a broom. And in the lower right, we see an image of a couple that has married, and then they're performing the act of jumping the broom. Now, years ago, when during the period of slavery, it was stated that if anyone touched the broom, they would be the first to die in the marriage. So that was the folklorical understanding. But brooms have a significance in African American culture because they are also powerful implements. You know, when I was a kid and I had to sweep the kitchen, and I was given the task of sweeping the kitchens. There were 4 children, and one washed the dishes, one dried the dishes, one would have to sweep the floor, and the other would have to mop the floor. And if I were trying to hurriedly sweep the kitchen and get through, and my father was sitting at the table, he would say, "Don't hit me with that broom." Not meaning really hit, but don't touch him with the broom, because to be touched with a broom is to induce lethargy or slow movement or sickness. And so that folklore is very significant. So Betty Saar, an artist who lives in California, created this piece, The Liberation of Aunt Jemima. And so she took images of the so-called mammy figure, and her liberation. She has given her a pistol as well as a gun. But notice that this mammy figure is also holding firm onto her broom. So while people who created this stereotypic material culture originally had the intention of creating these images as servants who could not talk back, who would not talk back, who but simply performed a service. In this case, this person traditionally holds on to a broom, which on the one hand has been interpreted as an implement of servitude, but in Aunt Jemima's mind, or the servant's mind, it is really a powerful instrument. And so we have brooms here from traditional brooms that are found throughout West Africa. And, when a person has a roadside stand, for example, and has to leave it, he or she may put a broom, suspend a broom in the upper in an upper corner of the shop or the roadside stand. And if there's an expectation that one would be honest. And so there have been stories that have been reported to me from field work that a would-be thief was compelled to pick up the broom and just sweep and stay there and sweep until the owner came back. And so the thief was caught, according to the folklore. Okay. And so when we're moving forward and we're asking again, what are the memories of Africa that were brought from Africa to the Americas? And here we have, to the right, we see two women using a mortar and pestle. And so we see the mortar, which is the lower object, the vase-like object that has been created from wood, and then the pestles that are used to pound the contents that are in the pestle. Now, to the upper left and the lower left, we see images from South Carolina, Sea Islands, and this is in the early 1900s. And so we see the similarity of the implements that have been created. And so these are food processing implements. And so say, for example, that you've gone and you've cut rice. And so you have to then put the rice, you put the rice in the, you put the stalks of rice in the pestle, and you pound it. And the purpose for doing that, the purpose of doing that is to loosen the rice grain from the chaff or from the husk. And so you've heard the phrase separating the wheat from the chaff. Well, in this case, we're dealing with grains of rice, and it's the same principle. And so we see here in the upper photographs that are in black and white, in the upper left, we see someone fanning the rice. And so a basket is used once the mortar and pestle has been used on the stalks of rice. You see she's fanning the rice, and the purpose is to lift the rice up and down from the surface of the basket that's holding it, such that the wind would blow the husk away. But, you know, the same to the right, you have the same principle of the use of the wind. And so she's pouring the rice into a receptacle below, and in the process, the wind blows the husk, which is a lighter material, away. And so in the lower colorful photographs, we see the fanning of rice from West Africa, and we see the use of rice, the use of the wind again as to blow the husk away in the lower right photograph. You know, there are so many things, so many elements of the cultural memory of Africa that are part of African-American life and lore. And we see two quilts on the left. And notice how these quilts are made. They have been pieced into strips. And so we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 strips in the upper left image. And once they have been pieced together, you know, one strip, and you know, it is sewn next to the next strip. And so these strips are sewn edge to edge to form a larger piece of cloth. In the textile below it, or the quilt below it, we see the same principle. We see strips that are sewn together to form the larger bed covering, or in this case, the quilt. But you notice that same principle is used in creating kente cloth, though kente cloth is woven by men, and it's woven into small bands or strips, as we see here. And so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 8 strips that are seen in this particular piece of cloth. And then the cloths are sewn edge to edge to form the larger piece of textile. And so we see the different graphic designs, or the different ideograms that are part of the design element. And so sometimes we see similar designs in African American quilts as well, but we see that here. And so what's part of the cultural memory is the idea of creating messaged units these different units that are part of kente cloth as an example, and that they are woven in strips, and the strips are sewn next to each other. And that same principle is used by the quilter who pieces together quilts and then into strips, and then sew those strips next to each other. We have another example of strip quilt, and this is another one, and it makes use of the triangle motifs, the repetitive triangle motifs, which is known as the flying geese motif. And so that's an important motif in American and in African American quilting. But you see this same symbol, though they don't call it flying geese in West Africa, but it is found in textiles and other art forms as well. When we're moving into the area of cultural memory that focuses on the production of ceramics. Now, these images or these textile, I mean, these ceramic forms are from Aiken, South Carolina, or more specifically from Edgefield, South Carolina. And we don't know exactly what these Afro-Carolinian face vessels were used for. Some have speculated that they may have been used for some type of ancestral veneration. But notice the eyes and the teeth. And the material that was used was kaolin to color it white. We're familiar with kaolin because it is also a material. We're familiar with it as a medicine. Kaopectate comes from kaolin. So if you have an upset stomach and you have to take kaopectate, well, that is a pinkish, a pinkish colored medicine, but the actual kaolin is white. And so we do see this material, this art form is important, and it resonates or carries the memory of Africa. Notice, for example, the central figure here. We see the eyebrows attached to the nose, forming the heart-shaped motif, which you see in the chokwe mask as well. And but again, we have face vessels that are found in shrines, and the chokwe are from Central Africa. This is to the far right. We have an image from the Akan people of present-day Ghana. But notice the eyebrows meeting the nose again, and forming this heart-shaped motif for the face. But this is a face vessel that would have been found on shrines in Ghana. We see other resonances of Africa. We see from the central western region of the continent, we see a walking cane, and this is the one that's the image that's to the right. And to the left, we have images that are from the South Carolina, Georgia area. And so we see these figurated canes. We see the one with the serpent motif. We have the other that has reptilian motifs, specifically the turtle and the alligator. And so we see these other figurated canes as well. And so while these are not quite exactly African pieces of material culture, they are African American pieces of material culture that drew upon African memory, or models of what was in Africa, or what was used in Africa. And so we have this image. This is from the Sea Islands, or from the Gullah area of South Carolina. And notice these specifically, the blue that is used for the door and the shutters of the windows. Now, in South Carolina, people often use this color blue, which they call haint blue, and haint refers to those persons that have strong spiritual powers, and one does not wish to be disturbed by the haints, especially at night. So you see these shutters, and sometimes the window sills are painted in blue as well. And so in this case, this is to make sure that since haints are not attracted to this particular color, they are repelled by it. It is one way to ensure that one has a restful sleep at night. We have bottle trees that are very important in African American lore. In years past, such trees, especially those that are blue, are either suspended from the limbs of trees, or they are attached to the limbs. Or sometimes if you don't have an actual tree, you can create one of and then put the bottles there. It has been stated, according to the folklore, that that spirits are attracted to these bottles, and once they go in, they cannot get out. And so that if you have a nefarious spirit that is just roaming around, this is one way to protect oneself or one's home, in this case with bottle trees. Now this lore is traced to Central Africa, to the Congo, Angola area. So on the African continent. And so we see here an artist, Alison Sarr, who has created artworks based on the bottle tree. And so we have the bottles extended in this case from hair that has been, the tips of which have been to which the bottles have been affixed. We have women who really know how to create medicines, and the forest is a place where they collect these medicines. And so we have the image of Romare Bearden's work to the left, and notice that in her left hand she holds a leaf, and in the right we have a work by Cynthia St. James, and this work is called Medicine Woman. And in her left hand she also holds a stem with leaves. And so the left hand is the powerful hand in African American folklore, and particularly that folklore known as hoodoo, which is a form of medicine, divination, and magic that has been utilized to give one a bit of power over one's destiny. Now, in this next image by Romare Bearden, the great collage artist, we see the conjure woman again, but notice he has created her face from different elements. These elements, the eyes, for example, he has cut out the eyes of a dog and affixed them to this particular woman's face. And it's an allusion to the fact that it is believed that the conjure woman could transform herself into an animal form. And in this, when people transform themselves into canines in Western European folklore, we think of them as werewolves. And so this is, or the more technical term is lycanthropy. And so we see this at play in African American folklore as well. But notice she has a diminutive or a very small right hand and a very large left hand. And the left hand allows her to have the power to pick up serpents. And notice that there are different bird forms. We're in the forest. Oh, sorry, let's go back. There are different bird forms that are here as well. And so she's in the forest where no one has actually been. And so it is that place where she goes to get her medicines. From there, she can strip some of the bark from trees, or she can take the leaves or some of the roots and use those elements to create very powerful medicines that can be used to cure, that can be used to heal. And so we see Romare Bearden invoking the memory of the conjure woman, or sometimes we use the word hoodoo doctor, or the hoodoo woman. And so this is an important part of African memory again. And so we looked at the forest as one place, as a source of medicine for this powerful woman. And in West Africa also, we go to marketplaces where these medicines have been created and processed, but particularly from the forest. And so we have this upper left image. We see the upper right image of materials that have been placed in containers. We even see the use of animal skulls, and in the lower image, the lowermost image, we even see bird beaks. So we see all of these elements that have been that can be used and processed to create medicines. And so remember that this is a direct reflection of the heritage of the hoodoo woman, or the conjure woman, as Romare Bearden called her. And then we come to the issue of death and dying, and particularly the cemeteries, or in this case, the graveyards. Now, to the upper right, we have a cemetery, or we see a grave of a Central African person who was a leader or a chieftain. And notice the cauldron that's on the grave, as well as the different pieces of pottery that we see here. And so we see to the left, we see a grave site from the Sea Islands. And in this particular case, we have the headstone, but we have a clock that has been placed on the grave, which has been fixed and to denote the time of his or her death. We notice that pottery and even ceramic glass and ceramic vessels have been placed on the grave. And normally they have been broken or chipped, or in some cases to indicate disuse, or a hole that has been punctured in the bottom of these vessels. And so it is to indicate that that they are there, in the service of the that have been placed as grave goods on a grave site. when we look at the lower image to the left, we see the use of shells, white shells that encircle the grave. And so we also note that that this is a connection to water. And of course, you know the story of Ebo's Landing Ebo's Landing, which took place either in South Carolina or Georgia in one of the Sea Islands areas. And so when a group of Ebos were disembarked into this region, but rather than submit to slavery, in resistance, they walked back into the water. And some claim that they were singing in their language, "Water brought us here, water will take us home." And so whilst people who tell the story of Ebo's Landing often will tell the story that it was a day of mass suicide, in fact, they said they were going home. And that since that time, we have noticed that in African American graves, particularly in that region, shells are often used to demarcate the graves. And in the lower right corner, we see different grave goods that have been placed on top of a particular grave. And so these are some ways in which we have remembered Africa over the years. And so if you're interested in reading about that a bit more, here are some books. Please locate Robert Roselle's, Alvia Wardlaw, and Maureen McKenna's book, Black Art, Ancestral Legacy, which was published by the Dallas Museum of Art. You can also get a copy of Robert Farris Thompson's Flash of the Spirit, African and Afro-American Art and Philosophy. Then John M. Blatch has a book that was published in 1978, The Afro-American Tradition in Decorative Art. And Blatch has another book by the work of their hands, Studies in Afro-American Folk Life, that was published in 1991. These are there are many books that have been created, that have been written that helps us to understand the ways in which African Americans have remembered Africa. So when we say we are an African people, that's not an exaggeration. It is an assessment based on an understanding of African American folk life and folklore, and particularly the material culture. We have looked at a few examples. We have looked at musical instruments. We have looked at baskets. We have looked at walking canes. We have looked at ceramic face vessels. We have talked about the broom lore, and we have also talked about decorative grooming of the hair. So these are just a few examples. I want to say thank you for joining the African American Museum and Library at Oakland today. And I hope that when you think and say we are an African people, you will think about the ways in which we have remembered Africa. And so let me ask you, can you think of other ways that we remember Africa in Black folk life and art? And how is this expressed how is this expressed with the principle of Kuumba, or creativity? Let me thank you for joining us again as we have examined resonances, or more specifically, cultural memories of Africa in Black American folk life and art. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. And let me say thank you so very much. And please join us for our other programs, and especially if for the new year, we have an exciting set of programs that we are that we will create on Zoom. So please tune in and find out what is coming forth in the new year. And we hope to see you back in the African American Museum, hopefully in the not too distant future, when we can gather together again. And but for now, we appreciate you joining us by way of Zoom. Thank you so very much. Good evening.